She does Twilight Sparkle Terra Strong. Has a copy of it. Anyways, I probably would have gotten it bound anyway because it means a lot to me. But I decided to do that. So today I'm going to read you this story. Before we get into that though, I feel like I should give you guys some context as to perhaps like why all of this did occur. So back in 2014, when the games first came out, I was super hyped for them, clearly, because Gen 3 had always been my favorite. And I started playing them and just absolutely fell in love with the world and the characters and just the design and everything about it. And I was at a point in my life where I was questioning a lot of my identity, personally. I was wondering if I was gay or bisexual, or if I was gender fluid or non-binary. I was going through a lot. And I went to Catholic school for 12 years. So being gay was something that was not ever, it one, first expressed to me that was a possibility, then two, something that was even morally okay. And so I had, overcome that clearly because I met a bunch of different people and kind of started doing some soul searching and opening my mind. And so I sort of kind of got over that initial hurdle. But I was still adjusting, like I was still in that period, like that transitional period. And so to be questioning all these things, for myself was a lot that I wanted to know, I really wanted to know. And I started to identify as ace, and then maybe bisexual, and gender fluid, and non-binary, and all these things. But I wasn't really sure of any of them at the time. And so I was going through a lot, and I had a boyfriend at the time who meant the absolute world to me. We dated for 4 or 5 years. And in high school, that's like a really big deal, right? Like, that's basically like you're gonna get married. And I really kind of, I thought that, I'm gonna be honest with you. But I was like 19 and kind of silly, but he was really special to me. We grew and learned a lot from each other, and like he really was my best friend in a lot of ways at the time. He saw me through a lot of different hardships. I started having my first big bouts of mental illness at that point too, and he supported me through that. So like this guy meant a lot to me, I'll just say that, And then I'm questioning all this, and he sort of started to get a little bit distant. He wasn't like as supportive as he probably could have been. I mean, we were trying our best, but when you're like 19, you're not always going to be the greatest person. So he wasn't always that, I guess, willing to listen, but I kind of like shrugged it off because I was like, okay, whatever. It didn't really bother me because I still loved him a lot. And I was in love with these games. I was geeking out about these games. It became a hyperfixation, and I didn't know what a hyperfixation was at the time. And he thought it was kind of funny how much I loved him, and I started writing the fan fiction, and I was telling him about the fan fiction. I think he read some of it, actually, from what I had written, but it was only the first chapter or two. And time passes. Gay marriage is legalized in America, which was an awesome day. I remember that day. That was a big moment, because again, I was questioning a lot of my identity on myself, and it was just so cool to feel all that happening. And there was actually a rainbow that day over my house, and so that kind of felt like a sign from God, like, like you go, like this is all, it's all okay, Rachel, you don't need to worry as much. And so that was all great. I was vibing, I was playing these games, I was super into it. And then August of 2015, I was moving back into school, and he basically completely unexpectedly just broke up with me. And it kind of devastated me a lot, because, like, basically all my friends from school were, like, our mutual friends. And it just sort of unleashed, like, a lot of emotions in me that I wasn't ready for. And I had already been kind of, like, abating, like, a panic disorder as it was. And so I started having really bad panic attacks, and I didn't really show up for some of my classes, and I was super, super depressed. Like, I just remember, like, it was so bad. I remember crying for probably just 2 days straight. Like, it was really hard for me to eat. My memory is not good, like, of this time in my life, and it's probably just because it was a whirlwind. Like, my memory from this event was not good. So I basically had to abandon everything in my life that happened to me in the past because I was so shaken by this. Like, anything that reminded me of high school or of him just incited these panic attacks in me, and I couldn't control it because I didn't know how to control it, and so that made it worse. And it was embarrassing. I was having them in public, and it was just awful, 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 awful for a whole year. And that's when I got into witchcraft, so that was the first thing that kind of helped me heal out of anything else, because I had to kind of rebuild all of my hobbies and my interests and figure out, like, okay, like, what makes me me. And so I got into witchcraft, and then over the years I had to dedicate a lot of time to healing and mental health. And I did my thesis last year, and it was kind of like a big culmination of a healing project. And ever since I did that, I just started feeling like leaps and bounds better, and all of that never bothered me as much anymore. Like, it was still gradual, but I just remember one day I woke up and it just, like, didn't bother me anymore, and it kind of had something to do with, like, a ritual I did at the beach. So it was kind of related to, again, like, more healing that I did, but it, like, completely went away, and it was amazing. And so I finally felt okay enough to start going back to things in my past. And something that started egging me back in the back of my mind was this fan fiction that I had written. And I remembered how much I loved it and how much it meant to me back then. And I took a good hard look at myself, and I was like, I want to finish this for whatever reason. I'm not over this story. I want to tell it. Like, I want to write it. It means a lot to me. And if I can do it, if I can handle doing that, it means that, like, I'm not going to let anything stop me anymore. Like, I'm not going to let my anxiety, my mental panic, all of that stuff that I went through in the past, like, all that traumatizing shit that happened to me in the past, I'm not going to let it bother me. Fan came on. I don't know if you'll be able to hear or not. And so I wrote it. And after I wrote it, again, it was just more, like, even more leaps and bounds better. And, you know, it set off my ADHD, and it became a hyperfixation, but it also became a hyperfixation that meant something to me, like, on a very deep personal level. So, that's the background for this. And so that's why I went to the trouble of paying to get this bound. It wasn't too expensive, but I did have to shell out money for it. And that's why I probably talk about it as much as I do, is because, like, it really genuinely means something to me on a quite personal level, and I'm not ashamed of that. It got me through a really difficult time, and it reconnected me with parts of myself that I had lost. And I will always remember that. And so I went back, edited it, cleaned it up, and now we have it bound. And just as I read the first chapter on my main channel, I am going to read you this story. The first chapter of The Devil in the Dead Sea. For you to go night-night. Oh, it was professionally typeset on Reedsy. I forget where I used to bind it. I think it was Lulu. Because Reedsy has a deal with Lulu, I'm pretty sure. I should know. Oh, and it has this on the side. It came with like a paper cover, like a jacket, but I didn't like the jacket. I want to get like a little anchor or something to put on it. Alright, let's go. Chapter 1. Maxie. Maxie, stuttered a man as he fearfully opened the door. Tabitha knew that his boss would be waiting for him on the other side, and he also knew that his boss wouldn't be particularly pleased with the news he had to deliver. What? Maxie said, without bothering to look up at him. He was busy narrowing down the pool of candidates for their final mission. Tabitha entered the room, stepping quietly and delicately. While Maxie's terseness was always to be expected, it had been particularly bad of recent. There's a situation I think you should know about. Maxie's hands froze on the page. His eyes flitted up over his glasses, but there was no fire behind them yet. His voice was even and cold. What do you mean, a situation? Well, you see, Tabitha stopped. The paper in his pocket burned hot like acid, and the words contained more evidence that would inevitably damn him. He choked at the possibility of bringing it to light. The pause was too long for Maxie, who now rose from his seat and marched toward Tabitha. You what, you insufferable fool? You what? While Maxie and Tabitha stood nearly the same height, with Tabitha surpassing him by only a few inches, Maxie's sharpened wrath was tall enough to make those petty inches seem infinite. Tabitha shrank, turning his head to avoid the pierce of his leader's gaze. Look at me when you are speaking. You will address me with your eyes when you are speaking, or I will give your job to someone better qualified. Well, it's kind of hard when you're standing practically on top of me. Maxie paused. Oh, he was pretty close, wasn't he? Personal space, personal space. Without wanting to lose the fire, for fear that Tabitha may grow complacent once again, Maxie retreated only a step. For a moment, he thought perhaps he had given Tabitha too much ire for letting the child intruder escape yesterday. Perhaps. What happened in Slateport? Maxie asked. That's where you were, weren't you? I was on my way to Slateport and... Maxie frowned, but allowed Tabitha room to speak. It was becoming increasingly difficult not to shoot the messenger, especially when the stuttering made it painfully obvious that the news was not only bad, but most likely pertained to the messenger himself. Then again, he had already fired several rounds, hadn't he? With wrists trembling, Tabitha reached for his pocket and pulled out the newspaper. I think you should see this, sir. Maxie reached for the paper with a surgeon's hand, as if the safe transfer of this document would somehow determine what was on the inside. As Maxie skimmed it over, Tabitha felt the need to fill the silence with, I think someone working for Stern destroyed the submarine parts. I can see that, Maxie snapped. Don't you think I have even the simplest powers of deduction? Of course Stern dismantled the submarine. But how can you tell? Maxie raised the paper as though he was going to strike Tabitha with it. But once he saw the big man with her, he lowered the page. Don't shoot the messenger, don't shoot the messenger. Even if the messenger had been particularly incompetent of recent. I need to spell this out for you, don't I? Maxie said. Stern got the tip from the boy. Hey, that was entirely your fault, and you're lucky I don't discipline you farther. Tabitha met Maxie's gaze with indigence, but submission. It was of no use trying to defend himself when Maxie wielded his words like swords. Seeing that Tabitha was adequately subdued, Maxie turned to carry the paper back to his desk. I am aware of the fact that several of our members rushed to the basement to try to stop him. But the simple fact is that you were not there. Courtney salvaged what she could, but not enough to prevent him from disabling vital parts of the submarine. Now, we would have just stolen more parts from Slateport, but it appears we're too late for that one too, now aren't we? Tabitha was silent. Punctuality, Tabitha. I think it would bear you a great benefit to learn the definition. There was an even longer, heavier silence as Maxie pressed his fingertips together in deep thought. After a few minutes of bearing this uncomfortable weight, Tabitha was almost relieved when Maxie began to speak again. The boy, Brendan, and the girl, May, are both working for the Pokemon League champion, Steven. And that spoiled, meddlesome son of Devon's president knows more about things that aren't any of his business than any man ever should. You see, when Brendan uncovered our plans for the submarine, he no doubt informed Stephen, who then alerted Stern, who ordered that the parts be destroyed. Precisely. So what do we do now? I will arrange alternative means of transporting our team to the seafloor cavern. In the meantime, Tabitha, I want you to stay as far away from me as possible. Tabitha did not move. He was still winded from the onslaught of Maxie's blade. However, Maxie persisted. This was effective immediately. Out. Now. Without another beat, Tabitha nodded and scurried out of his leader's office. Maxie sat there as he again studied the words on the page. Submarine dismantled. Damn it all to hell. After all these years, his dream was about to be foolishly unraveled by two nosy children being fed half-truths by Devon Silverspoon. A silver spoon who wanted nothing more than to play detective because some vapid regional competitive organization decided that he had the most powerful Pokemon in all the land. What an embarrassment. The air was growing heavy around him, so Maxie rose to contemplate the painting on his back wall. It was a replica of the mural in Granite Cave, which served as a daily reminder of his ultimate goal. He traced the figures of the two primordial beasts with his eyes. The shadow of Groudon thrashed against the quaking earth, its claws tearing fissures into stone. But in the wake of this devastation, Maxie knew that the magma would rise and cool, giving birth to new landscapes where life could prosper. Meanwhile, all that rock would sink deeper into the molten ground and, ignited by that very flame, would combust itself and transform, almost alchemy-like, into more magma that would pool and rise so that the cycle could begin anew. He had studied it, even witnessed it, many times before. But his eyes strayed from the graceful wrath of the red flame and found themselves wrapped in the crashing waves, and more prominently, on the blue silhouette that leapt and bounded in and out of pillars of water and fire, egging its competitor on, Kyogre. While Groudon slashed and tore, commanding massive volcanic eruptions and tectonic plates, his opponent merely danced around him, teasing him and chasing him and sending wind and rain that could never truly stop a pyroclast fueled so deep within the earth, only slow it. Maxie knew that he could bring Groudon to its rightful victory, to free it from the endless torment of its vexing blue counterpart, to vanquish this hideous conflict once and for all. A conflict that had not ended, would only come to a stalemate. And yet, as he continued to stare, he found himself drawing more and more into the unabashed spirit of the unrelenting tide, and he was faced with the sickening realization that he knew what, or rather who, his current situation obliged him to summon. Dun, dun, dun! It's Archie. I said that in the last video too. So that's the first chapter. I don't know if I'm going to read more. I might. We'll see how I'm feeling. I'll see what you guys want. It feels weird to promote something that I wrote on my own YouTube channel. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, because I did write it. But it's not like, I'm not making money off of it or anything. I have no intention of making money off of it. I just did it for the love of the story and the love of the characters, as it should be when you're writing fan fiction or when you're doing anything for fandom. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. I might follow it up with chapter 2. We might go through the whole thing if that's what you guys want. If this is something you're interested in. I think the sound of the pages are picking up pretty nicely, so that's good. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful night, day, night, wherever you are. Sweet dreams. Calm, blissful day. And, to let Kyogre win.